Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with more hip hop news. Now, another great discussion came from the Joe and Jada podcast, Fat Joe and Jada Kisses podcast about hip hop and another great topic. So they discussed the biggest debut albums ever, not the greatest, but the biggest debut album. So the album that probably had the most impact, the album that was up in the forefront the most, the album that got the most play, the album that changed everything. So of course, Fat Joe picked "Get Rich or Die Trying" and its impact, huge impact, and then Jadakiss picked, a West Coast artist and Snoop Dogg, his Doggy Style, as the greatest debut album ever. Now, both of these are both excellent choices, and there are a lot of great debut albums in hip hop history, and they all important for the careers of these artists because the debut album, I should say, is important for the simple fact of you only get one time to make a first impression. So the way the world views your debut album can change everything. Now, there have been artists with not great debut albums or albums that really didn't get seen, but then later they came along, i.e., Ti. His first album, "I'm Serious," is not really an album that you talk about in the greatest debut albums, but he did great work afterwards. Even the Young Jeezy, that I think it was "Come Shop with Me," his first album. I can't remember, but his first album wasn't TM 101, but most people would think it was TM 101, but it wasn't. But he continued to do great work afterwards. So there's been a lot of artists who have had not great first debut albums that eventually got the backing later. But it's very difficult to do so, especially in today's age where they're not really working records. There's not really sales that's not up. There's not really label support. Now, if you do it on your own through your own marketing and things like that, you can do it, but it's more difficult now so than back then. Back then you can get, most artists sign these crappy deals starting off, and they didn't have huge backings from these labels. And then eventually they got with the majors and had the support behind them and then got the budgets and things like that. So it sounded a lot different. But today, it's a lot difficult to do so. But these debut albums are the intro to the world, and the world will view you accordingly, for the most part. But they set the tone and jumpstart your career. Uh, but we've seen great debut albums like Biggie's "Ready to Die," Jay Z's "Reasonable Doubt," Nas's "Illmatic," Dr. Dre's "The Chronic," Wu Tang "Into the Wu," Kanye West's "College Dropout." Excellent debut projects that changed the trajectory of their careers and made them household names that made them cemented in hip hop history, so to speak. Now, these are all graded and set trends as well. Um, and for several different reasons, right? Because Biggie's "Ready to Die" album just submitted him as a great artist because of his storytelling ability, his wordplay, his ability to be funny, his ability to just be an overall MC, especially coming back from not having the look, being a bigger guy, being from New York, just being from Bed-Stuyvesant, everything that came with being Biggie, then being having the backing behind Bad Boy Records and Puff. Jay-Z's "Reasonable Doubt," they already knew he was a great lyricist, but him to being able to put a project together, that's elite with his rapping and his ability to just be one of the best MCs ever. They saw that early. Nas' "Illmatic," we don't even have to talk about that much because we know what that album did for not only me, but for hip hop, being able to work with multiple producers, for him to be at such a young age, ahead of his time, so to speak. Um, just amazing album. Dr. Dre "The Chronic" album, what it did for being able to have an album actually talking about weed exclusively and being centered around that, being from the West Coast, being the production that he had, the sounds and the beats and the creative genius that he had musically. Wu Tang, Into the Wu, how many different, uh, having a group that large and having that much talent with the great production from RZA and having true MCs like Raekwon the Chef and having Method Man and Ghostface Killer and all these different members of the group and being able to just not only be the biggest groups of all time, but one of the biggest hip hop brands of all time. Wu Tang is the symbol is more famous than shoot Nike or Reebok or whatever you want to put out there. Just them being to do that, and then of course Kanye West's College Dropout, an album that actually addressed college when other artists, hip hop artists, never did so before. I mean, it's been bits and pieces here, but other than J. Cole and Kanye, these were two of the biggest components of college, especially being in college around that time, uh, to being able to have somebody to relate to you even if it was talking about the college dropout, it had elements of talking about college and fraternities and things like that. But there's also a lot of albums that didn't get credit throughout their for the debut albums. Like one of my favorite is Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor. Of course, this applies the Real Testament, Cardi B's Invasion of Privacy, Kodak Black Painting Pictures. Now he had songs like Skirt, and then he had the No Flocking song that he had before. But this album, his debut album, proved that he can rap and put a project together, and he was able to do that throughout his career. And he has an album coming up as well. But I think Food and Liquor is one of the top hip hop albums of all time, in my opinion, just because of the content, the production, the rapping, the everything that comes with being an MC and true hip hop has to offer. Still one of my favorite albums today. Um, but overall, when you think about the lyricism, the individuality, the content, that album is going to go up there. But if you're asking me what is the greatest debut album of all time, in my opinion, I have to say that Get Rich or Die Trying is the biggest album. Not saying the best because that distinction goes to Illmatic. But if you're gonna say the biggest debut album of all time, I have to say 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying because of the simple fact of what it did for hip hop. Um, selling all of the records that he did, going 9 times platinum, being able to have a hit song like in a club that crossed over to different to different demographics, whether you're white, black, Asian, whatever, Mexican, whatever, you they like that song and it still gets played today. And the ability to come out the way he did, having the reputation of being shot 9 times, having to beef with Ja Rule, it was just a major story at the time because we were like, "Who is this guy, 50 Cent?" And then comes out with this Wankster video, where he's dissing Ja Rule. Pretty much that whole Get Rich or Die Trying album was a diss record, um, diss album pretty much for different people. But having the look that he had with the muscles and then with we're on the gym equipment and in the club, being upside down, pause on the video and stuff like that. He was basically essentially the 2003 version of LL Cool J. And ironically, they're both from Queens, New York. But 50 Cent's debut album is going to go up there with the greats. Even the B-sides, songs like Mini Man that had a video but didn't get enough acclaim. These songs can be put in the greatest debut songs of all time. Greatest debut album songs of all time. But East Coast, and he was an East Coast artist with West Coast backing, being signed to, Interscope and Shady Aftermath. That was unique to see because West Coast had everybody on that side. They did add Eminem before him, which is a Midwest artist coming out of Detroit. But Get Rich or Die Trying is probably the biggest debut of all time and one of the highest selling, if not the highest selling album of all time. But in addition to what it did musically, it also gave us some of the best, personalities and talent of all time as well. So a lot of people don't talk about how Get Rich or Die Trying spawned the careers of G Unit, which consisted of Tony Yayo, which is one of the best personalities in hip hop history. Love his interviews and what he has to say on things. He always gives a unique perspective. Then you have artists like The Game, which I think is in my top 10 rappers of all time. He's very underrated. Doesn't have He was blackballed at one point. I think he still is, but lyrically, he's one of the best lyricists to ever do it. Then you have Lloyd Banks, who's one of the best freestylers or wordsmiths to ever come out of hip hop. And then Young Buck, who's another underrated artist who had his first project is an underrated debut album as well. He had a lot of great music and a lot of great sounds that still are timeless and still play today. So not only did Get Rich or Die Trying help 50 Cent in hip hop, but it also gave us other pieces like that as well. That the members of Chi Unit. So yeah, of course, Get Rich or Die Trying is the biggest debut album of all time. I have to give it the credit that it deserves and their respect because of what it did. No other artist has had an album debut that big. Of course, they had other albums that were bigger, but they didn't have the biggest debut album like 50 had. So tell me what you think your biggest debut album is, and until next time, I'll see you next time.